Today I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step guide for turning your bookshelf into a rainbow. Okay, before we get started, let me tell you that this is possibly the worst way to organize books, except if you were to organize by its thickness. Then I think that would be a more useless way. And to be honest, it's also slightly better than organizing it by height, because that would also be only for aesthetic purposes, right? I mean, you could remember a book you've seen by its cover, but then the spine might have a different color than that of the front cover. So, which is why this way of organizing might not be quite the best. But we're doing it for the aesthetic, guys. Let's just move on. Okay. Yeah, so coming back to the guide. Obviously, this color coordination thing would have looked way better if it was actually a straight line. So, step one is to clear your bookshelf, obviously. So my mini library in my house is actually made up of books owned by everybody in the house. That's like 4 people. So there's A, many books, and B, many types of books. There's children's books, textbooks, books that are actually just prints from when we went to college, set of papers, cookbooks, sewing, crochet books, and like a bajillion journal books really. And then there are books that I read for office which I don't really want to mix with the other books lest I lose all of them. So the first step was to clear this rack out so that I could eventually segregate this mess so that I could decide which books I wanted to use in the first place. This part will also require some dusting on your part. If you're like me who does not dust her books often, then expect a lot of it to be everywhere. Once you have all your books from the shelf on the floor, we can move on to step number 2, which is weed the week out. Basically, decide which books you want to use for this scheme. No matter how much you want to use all the books you own for this experiment, you won't be able to. First, I sorted them into things that I could not afford to lose in this colorful mess, and books that could not be missed because finding books in the color scheme can be kinda tough. Also, books that needed to stay in one place, like my office books because they needed to eventually be returned, and my set of incomplete Harry Potter for emotional reasons, and my magazines because I just didn't want to get them mixed. I like them according to their publication, within which they are like sorted by the month that they were published in. Then comes the most important part of this step, deciding the books that will go into your color scheme according to their width. Like you want enough color to be on the spine of the book for you to really be able to use this. Which is why there is a set of books that I weeded out which did not really have a spine. You want to select like at least half a centimeter and a distinct color spine with more or less a solid color. I mean, you can work with a few books which have multiple colors, but there can't be a lot of those, otherwise it'll start messing up your color scheme there. Yeah, once that is done, we can move on to step number 3, which is organizing them in the rainbow. Here we are finally at the fun part of this whole exercise. The color wheel follows the rainbow, which is violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. And the rainbow colors are actually sort of a wheel. Like yellow, red, and blue are primary colors. Then you mix them and then you get secondary colors like this. There's actually a pattern here. You can cut this circle at any point and voila! You have a linear color wheel. I mean, linear color scale. Yeah. Of course, this is like a simplified version of it because there are tints and shades of any color, but to be honest, you don't really have to understand most of it to organize your books this way. Believe me, because I really don't. So I decided to start with violet at one end, which would like fray into sort of a purple out there, and then on the other end I would have like red with perhaps the pinks going on that side. But of course there's more, the blacks and the whites. Really, truly speaking, there is no logic to where you can place black and white. I mean, I chose to place them at either ends because this seemed like an easy choice. Because the blacks blended well with my pinks because they were sort of dark, and the whites blended well with the purples as it seemed to sort of fade out in the end and sort of had like a cool tint to it. But if you think about it, I think it would have been fine even if I exchanged their places. They blend really well. I mean, you could also do it at the yellow-green junction. where the yellow could like merge with the white and the green could merge with the black. Or you could just omit the blacks and whites altogether. But in my case, there were so many of them, so I just decided to keep them in the color scheme instead. So we will put all of this together at some place on the floor before we sort of start shelving it, so that you have like a single queue of books in this pattern at your disposal before you sort of take it to the shelf. It'll be especially helpful if you're not confident about being able to make this pattern, because it will be much more forgiving this way. So like we understood the whole color scheme in 7 colors, right? So now you can start laying all these books in the color scheme. The best way is to start placing it on the floor with the spine up, and you sort of instinctively will be able to tell what goes where. Like aqua blues will come between the green and the blue, the browns will go somewhere between orange and red, the light greens will fall between the yellow and the dark green. I ended up placing the pinks before the red, so that kind of included all the dark pinks, and purple went on the other end after the violets. There is a very thin line between the two, like the purple could very easily eventually like become pink, but you will still be able to sort it. But even if you do mess it up, it'll be still fine, because one is disconnected from the other in this linear sort of pattern that we're trying to create. Because of the tints and the shades that we talked about earlier, there will be no perfect transition really. I mean, as long as they're in the same color family, you can sort of place it together, and at the end, it will still show through. Now we can move on to step number 4. Rainbow on my bookshelf. If you have a regular shelf, then you could also place it vertically, or you could have books in the pattern diagonally. There's so many ways in which you can create this rainbow. But because I'm a boring person and I have this brilliantly uneven bookshelf, I wanted to go with a single sort of a sweeping pattern that went across 3 layers. So now you can start shelving your books. I started with black. The idea was to go from black to white with like this red to purple scheme in between. So I started placing my black spines in first, then the sort of like pink, dark pink spines which moved on to red, and then like a whole set of brown, which eventually followed by yellow. While I was shelving the books, I thought at a point that maybe I wanted this row and this third row connected, but this shelf was way too huge. So I started filling it with white books, hoping that the eye won't read them as much when the pattern is complete. So I kept placing a few books there and went almost from orange to green to eventually the blues. But I decided pretty quickly that I didn't really like it and that I'd rather have them empty. So I took them out, and the additional pseudo shelf that I had created. Also, there was way too much space on the right to not have the white books there. So I took them out, and the additional pseudo shelf that I had created, I removed the books and placed them on the 2 shelves above. Once I had made that decision, it was sort of an easy way forward. I placed the blues, the dark blues, the violets, the purples, and eventually all the whites. Look very closely, my whites also eventually like fade into sort of a grey, which would have connected very well if I had used like a few light grey tones on my black left corner as well. But I was way too tired, so I didn't really do that. Here you can see me adjusting the bookshelf a little, so that there's enough space for all the books that I hope I would get to place. And now we have this very huge shelf, extremely empty, which has all my magazines in place, and I'm sort of happy with how this has turned out. In fact, I'm so happy that I posted a picture on Instagram immediately, like on the day the shelf was made. If you were watching this video for inspiration, I hope you found it. If you were watching this video for a tutorial, I hope it helped you. If you were watching this video for entertainment, I hope it entertained you. This has been my video for this week. I will see you guys next week. Bye bye.